Everyone knew the winter bus route through the mountain pass was dangerous. What made people uneasy wasn't the cliffs or the avalanches or the way the snow could swallow headlights whole. It was the fact that the route never closed. Not during blizzards, not during blackouts, not even after accidents no one liked to talk about. The road was considered necessary. On one of the worst snow nights of the decade, the bus rolled out anyway. The storm had already erased the sky. Snow came down in thick, slanted sheets, hammering the windshield like thrown gravel. The driver, a man known only by his last name stitched onto his jacket, kept both hands on the wheel and his eyes fixed forward. The heater roared, but the cold clung stubbornly to the cabin, as if it had found a way inside and refused to leave. The first passengers were waiting at a lonely roadside stop, 3 silhouettes hunched against the wind. They boarded silently. None of them removed their coats. Heavy parkas, scarves pulled tight, gloves still on. Snow clung to the fabric, yet didn't melt, even under the warm cabin lights. They paid without looking up and moved down the aisle with slow, careful steps, choosing their seats with unsettling precision. Front right, middle left, back right. A pattern. At the second stop, 2 more passengers emerged from the storm, faces hidden, movements stiff. Same behavior, same silence, same refusal to remove their winter gear. They sat in the remaining matching seats, completing the pattern as if it had been planned long before the bus arrived. The driver watched them through the mirror, his jaw tightening. That's when he noticed something wrong. No one's breath fogged the air. Outside, the storm raged, cold enough to burn skin. Inside, the bus was warm, but every exhale should have bloomed white, if only faintly. It didn't. The air around the passengers stayed perfectly clear, untouched. He told himself it was stress, fatigue, the long night already working on his nerves. Then came the next stop. The shelter was empty until it wasn't. A single figure stood just beyond the headlights, tall and motionless, as if it had been placed there. It stepped forward only when the door opened, climbing aboard without a word. When it passed the driver, a smell followed, cold, stale, like air sealed away for years. The passenger took a seat, the front right seat. There was already someone sitting there, yet somehow, impossibly, both fit. The driver stared at the mirror, heart thudding. The seat looked willing, as if it had made room. He checked the tickets, checked them again. The count didn't match. There were more passengers than tickets sold for the route. Outside, the road climbed higher into the mountains. The radio crackled, then dissolved into static. Ahead, the headlights caught a wall of snow and broken trees. An avalanche had swallowed the road whole. The bus slowed to a stop. Behind him, every passenger sat perfectly still in their assigned seats, coats on, faces hidden, breath invisible. And for the first time, the driver understood the rumors. This route didn't just take people through the mountains. Sometimes it brought something back. The bus idled in front of the avalanche, engine rumbling low, as if uncertain whether it should keep breathing. Snow pressed in from all sides, thick and soundless, swallowing the road until there was no clear beginning or end, just white piled against white. The driver reached for the radio. "Dispatch," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Route's blocked. I'm at the north face of the pass. Need instructions." Only static answered.
He adjusted the dial, tapped the unit, tried a different channel. The static shifted in pitch, but never broke. It sounded wrong, too even, almost deliberate, like something being held open instead of breaking apart. Behind him, the passengers did not react. No sighs, no complaints, no anxious movement the way stranded travelers usually behaved. They sat upright, hands resting on their laps, coats still zipped to their chins. Their heads faced forward, but their attention felt angled, as if they were listening to something the driver couldn't hear. The driver stood and walked the aisle, boots thudding softly against the rubber floor. The heat vents blasted near his legs, but the air farther back felt colder, heavier. His breath fogged now, his alone. He stopped beside the front right seat. Up close, the two occupants still didn't touch. There was a thin, impossible gap between them, like the space between magnets that refused to meet. He couldn't see their faces, only layers of fabric and shadow. The smell was stronger here. Cold storage, dust, time. "You'll have to move," he said, forcing authority into his tone. "Only one person per seat." Neither turned. He felt suddenly foolish, like he'd spoken to mannequins. He continued down the aisle, checking tickets again, comparing names and numbers. Everything looked normal on paper, printed dates, standard ink, yet the tickets felt brittle, as if they'd been handled too many times already. That's when he noticed something else. Every ticket had the same destination listed. Not just the same town, the same stop. The final stop past the pass, a place so small it barely registered on most maps. The driver frowned. That wasn't impossible, but it was unlikely. And yet every passenger, every single one, was headed there. A sound came from outside. Not wind, not snow. Footsteps, slow, heavy, crunching deliberately through deep drifts. The driver froze. The headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the storm, and within it something moved. A shape approached from the darkness, tall and uneven, as if it were carrying weight wrong. It stopped just short of the light's edge. Someone knocked on the door. Once, then again. The driver stared at the handle, pulse hammering in his throat. The route log said no more stops. The road was officially closed. No shelter, no signage. Behind him, the passengers shifted, just slightly, at the same time. Their heads turned together, toward the door. The knock came a third time. From the radio, through the static, a voice slipped in, thin, distant, unmistakably recorded. "Please do not open the door. This unit is not cleared for additional passengers." The voice looped, warping as it repeated. The knocking stopped. Outside, the shape stepped backwards, retreating into the storm. Inside the bus, one of the passengers finally moved. A gloved hand lifted slowly and pointed toward an empty seat, as if inviting someone in.
The driver did not sit back down. The gloved hand remained raised, finger extended toward the empty seat near the middle of the bus. The gesture was calm, patient, certain. It carried the quiet confidence of something that knew the order of events and saw no reason to hurry them. "No," the driver said. The word felt small inside the bus. He stepped backward toward the front, eyes never leaving the aisle. The passengers' heads followed him as one, their movements smooth and synchronized, like they were sharing a single set of joints. Fabric creaked softly as they turned. No breathing, no blinking. The radio hissed again. Manifest discrepancy detected. The phrase repeated, skipping like a damaged record. The driver reached out and shut the radio off completely. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed in, thick enough to feel against the skin. He returned to the ticket board, hands shaking now. He counted again. 8 tickets. 10 passengers.
He counted the seats next. There were too many. Not new seats, no torn fabric, no fresh bolts, but spaces where the eye expected seats to be. Gaps in the aisle that bent perspective slightly, like looking at a reflection in warped glass. His mind slid away from them when he tried to focus, as if they weren't meant to be examined directly. The bus creaked, not from the wind, from weight shifting. The passengers adjusted in unison, settling deeper, and the suspension groaned as if taking on more mass than before. Frost crept along the windows from the corners inward, thin white veins branching across the glass, despite the heater still blasting. The driver's breath fogged harder now. He pulled open the glove compartment, searching for anything, flares, a logbook, something to anchor himself. His fingers brushed brittle paper. An old route archive sheet, yellowed, folded too many times. The route number matched. So did the departure time. The date was decades old. Next to it, stamped in red, was a single word: missing. His stomach dropped. A note had been scribbled beneath it in faded ink, barely legible. Passengers accounted for. Driver unconfirmed. A sound came from the back of the bus, soft, wet, like fabric being peeled away from skin. The driver turned just in time to see one passenger, middle left seat, slowly tug a glove free. What lay beneath was not frost-bitten skin. It was gray, smooth, and stretched too tight, like something wrapped around a shape it didn't quite fit. Thin cracks ran along the surface, and through them leaked darkness, not blood. The glove slid to the floor. The passenger replaced the hand on their lap. No one reacted. The driver staggered back, heart hammering. His heel caught on nothing, on one of those impossible gaps, and he nearly fell. The passengers leaned forward slightly, expectant. The empty seat in the middle seemed closer now, larger, inviting in a way that made his thoughts blur around the edges. Outside, the storm began to quiet, not fade, pause, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to decide whether the manifest would finally balance.
The driver backed away from the aisle until his shoulders hit the closed door of the bus. The cold metal seeped through his jacket instantly, as if the vehicle itself had turned against him. The empty seat in the middle row seemed closer than before, its outline sharper now, less willing to be ignored. He looked again at the archive sheet in his hands. The paper trembled, not from the engine, but from something beneath it, like it was responding to being noticed. Faint impressions pressed up from the page, letters that hadn't been there seconds ago, slowly darkening into legibility. Additional lines appeared under the original report. Weather conditions, severe. Communications lost at mile marker unknown. Passengers remained calm. The driver swallowed. A new sentence etched itself in, stroke by invisible stroke. Passengers refused to disembark. The bus lights flickered. For a brief moment, the interior reflected in the windows didn't match reality. The driver saw rows of seats filled with figures wearing older coats, outdated styles, different fabrics, but sitting in the exact same positions as the passengers behind him now. Then the lights steadied, and the reflection returned to normal. The passengers had not moved. The driver forced himself forward, step by careful step toward the door. His hand hovered near the emergency release. He told himself that if he could just get outside, plant his boots in the snow, breathe real air, everything would realign. Before he touched the handle, a voice spoke. It came from the front right seat, muffled,
layered as if several mouths were trying to use the same sentence. "This stop is not for you." The driver froze. The passengers' heads tilted slightly, all at once. The motion was subtle, almost polite. The frost on the windows thickened, sealing the outside world away until there was nothing beyond the glass but white blur. The radio turned itself back on. No static this time. A clear, calm voice filled the bus, an old recording, flattened by age. "Reminder to all operators," it said. "If a discrepancy is noted between tickets sold and occupants present, do not attempt correction. Allow the route to complete." The driver laughed, sharp and broken. "Complete where?" he demanded. The voice did not answer. The bus shuddered, not from wind, from movement. The engine revved on its own, gauges twitching as the vehicle lurched forward. Snow shifted outside, parting just enough to reveal a narrow corridor through the avalanche. Not a road, more like a wound forced open. The steering wheel turned by itself, aligning perfectly. The driver stumbled back into his seat as the bus began to roll. Behind him, the passengers relaxed for the first time. Shoulders lowered, hands settled. One by one, seatbelts slid out of their housings and clicked shut, some around bodies, some around nothing at all. The empty seat in the middle row remained unbuckled, waiting. As the bus crept into the white corridor, the driver's archive paper in his hand completed its final line. Replacement pending. And far ahead, barely visible through the snow, a dim cluster of lights flickered, warm, steady, and far too close to a destination that should have been hours away.
The lights ahead didn't flicker like distant towns usually did. They were steady, even, too deliberate to be real. The driver leaned forward, squinting through the frost-laced windshield. According to the route map burned into his memory, there was nothing out there for miles. No service station, no settlement, just forest, rock, and the drop-off that swallowed sound. Yet the bus rolled toward the glow as if it had always been meant to. The road beneath the tires felt wrong, not packed snow, not asphalt, something smoother, muted, like driving over layers of fabric. The steering wheel resisted when the driver tried to correct course, tugging gently back, insistent but not aggressive, like a hand guiding another hand. The passengers sat quietly, but something had changed. Their heads now faced the lights, not turned, oriented. As the bus drew closer, shapes emerged beyond the glow. Low buildings, a platform, a shelter roof bowed under snow that never slid off. The scene looked assembled rather than built, details slightly off, proportions just a little too careful. A bus stop. No markings, no signage, just a raised curb and a stretch of cleared ground where snow refused to settle. The bus slowed on its own. The doors hissed open. Cold air poured in, not sharp and alive like mountain cold, but flat and stale, carrying the same sealed-away smell that lingered on the passengers' coats. The driver gagged, covering his mouth. No one moved at first. Then the passenger in the back right seat stood. Up close, the driver saw the coat wasn't moving with a body inside it. It hung, supported by something that only approximated a human shape. The figure stepped into the aisle, boots touching the floor without sound, and walked toward the open door. As it passed the empty middle seat, it paused. The coat's hood tilted toward it, as if acknowledging the space. Then it exited.
One by one, the others followed. They disembarked in silence, movements practiced, orderly. Some left shallow footprints on the ground outside, others left none at all. Each stepped onto the platform and joined a loose line facing away from the bus, toward the dark beyond the lights. The driver watched, frozen. When the last passenger reached the door, it stopped and turned. For the first time, the driver saw beneath the hood. There was no face, just layers of shadow folding inward, and far back within them a suggestion of eyes, dim, patient, and disappointed. It gestured with a gloved hand, toward the bus, toward the empty seat. The driver shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. "I delivered the route. That's enough." The figure lingered, then stepped down into the snow. The doors closed. The lights outside blinked once and vanished. The bus was alone again, idling in the storm. The driver sagged against the wheel, chest heaving. He was still inside, still himself. Behind him, a seatbelt clicked shut. The empty seat was no longer empty.
The driver did not turn around right away. He knew, felt that something was sitting behind him now. The bus had changed again. The air pressed heavier, colder, like the cabin had sunk several feet underground. The heater was still running, but the vents exhaled nothing but a weak, numb breath. The seatbelt had buckled itself. Click, final, certain. Slowly, the driver raised his eyes to the mirror. Someone sat in the middle seat. Not one of the passengers from before. This one was different, smaller, narrower shoulders, no snow on the coat, no smell of sealed cold. The fabric looked newer, softer, wrong in its own way, like it belonged to a different decade than the bus. The figure's hands rested bare on its knees, bare skin. The driver's heart stuttered. "You didn't get on," he said. His voice sounded distant, like it was traveling through water. "I would have remembered." The passenger lifted its head. Its face looked human, perfectly so. Too perfect. Skin smooth, eyes clear, expression neutral in a way that made it impossible to guess age or intent. "I was already here," it replied. The voice came from the mouth, but also from the walls, the floor, the windows, a chorus forced into one throat. The driver shook his head. "Everyone got off." "Yes," the passenger agreed calmly. "Everyone who belonged to the night." Outside the windshield, the storm had resumed, but the snow fell straight down now, neat and quiet, like stage dressing. The road ahead had returned, clean, open, impossible. The bus lurched forward. The driver slammed his foot on the brake. Nothing happened. The pedal went down easily, useless as a dead limb. The bus followed the road, speed steady, obedient to something other than him. In the mirror, the passenger studied him with gentle curiosity. "You're not on the manifest," he said, forcing logic like a shield. "You don't have a ticket." The passenger smiled. "I know." It leaned forward slightly, and the driver saw then that its feet did not touch the floor. They hovered just an inch above it, perfectly aligned with where the floor used to be before the extra spaces appeared. The figure's hands rested bare on its knees, bare skin. The driver's heart stuttered. "I already delivered them." "Yes," the passenger said. "You did very well."
The road signs began to appear, familiar shapes, familiar curves, but every symbol was wrong, letters subtly rearranged, distances counting down too quickly. The driver felt memory slipping, not vanishing, reorganizing. "What happens to me?" he asked. The passenger considered this, head tilting in a way that mimicked the others. "It depends," it said, "on whether you intend to get off at the final stop." The destination sign above the windshield flickered. For a moment, it showed the name of the last town. Then it changed. It now read, "In service." And behind the driver, somewhere deeper in the bus, where no seat had ever existed, something else shifted, stretching, making room. The driver gripped the wheel as the road bent into a stretch he didn't recognize. The forest on either side leaned too close, branches arching inward as if listening. Snow no longer piled on the shoulders of the road. It slid away from the tires, retreating just before contact. The bus was not cutting through the night. The night was making room. Behind him, the passenger in the middle seat sat perfectly still. The driver felt watched even when he didn't look, not stared at, monitored like a vital sign. The windshield began to frost from the edges inward, delicate white lines crawling across the glass despite the wipers scraping uselessly. The frost didn't form randomly. It connected, branched, resolved into shapes. A map. The driver's breath caught. The lines matched the road beneath them, not as it was now, but as it had been. Old curves, abandoned spurs, detours erased years ago after collapses and deaths. And along the route, small marks appeared. Seats, rows and rows of them, drawn as simple rectangles, each labeled with faint numbers. Some were crossed out, some circled. One rectangle pulsed softly. The middle seat. "That's not possible," the driver muttered. The passenger leaned forward just enough for its reflection to appear faintly in the glass, out of sync with its real position. "This is how the route remembers, not places, positions." The bus hit a bump. No, passed over something. A jolt ran through the frame, followed by a sound like distant metal tearing. In the mirror, the driver saw a shape detach from the darkness behind them, something tall, stretched, dragging itself upright from the road where it had been left behind. It ran after the bus, not fast, certain. The passenger turned its head slightly, listening. Another driver, from a different year. The thing outside gained ground without moving its legs properly, its form stuttering forward as if skipping frames. The frost map updated itself. One of the crossed-out seats slowly uncrossed. The driver slammed his fist against the wheel. "You said everyone else got off." "They did, but not everyone stays gone." The road sign ahead loomed out of the snow. "Final stop, 1 mile." The letters rearranged themselves as the bus passed beneath. "Final seat, 1 left." The thing behind them screamed. The sound punched through the bus walls, vibrating the windows, rattling the empty spaces where seats had once been. The driver felt something inside his chest loosen, memories shifting, names thinning. The passenger finally stood. It filled the aisle more than it should have. "You can stop this," it said gently. "You just have to decide where you belong." The frost map reached the bottom of the windshield. The pulsing rectangle spread. The middle seat was no longer the only option. The bus slowed without braking. Snow fell away entirely now, replaced by a flat, gray ground that reflected no light. The forest vanished as if it had never existed, leaving only open space and a single structure ahead, an illuminated checkpoint standing alone in the dark. Floodlights hummed overhead. Figures waited beneath them. They wore uniforms, old ones, thick coats with patches stitched in styles that hadn't been used for decades. Their hats were pulled low, faces shadowed, but their posture was unmistakably official, orderly, expectant. The bus rolled to a perfect stop. The doors opened. Warm air rushed in. The driver blinked, disoriented. The warmth didn't belong. It smelled wrong, like dust, ink, and old offices sealed away underground. One of the uniformed figures stepped forward and climbed aboard, boots striking the steps with a hollow echo. "Evening," it said, politely. Its voice was flat, over-rehearsed. "We've been expecting this unit." The driver opened his mouth, but the passenger from the middle seat spoke first. "The route is incomplete," it said. The uniformed figure nodded. "We see that." It glanced down at a clipboard, pages yellowed and curling. The driver saw names written there, some blurred, some scratched out, some still painfully clear. A column marked "Status" ran beside them. Most read "Resolved." One read "Pending." That line pulsed faintly, ink shifting like it was still wet. The uniformed figure looked up at the driver. "You're early," it said. "That usually makes this part harder." "Part of what?" the driver asked. "Reassignment." Behind the bus, the thing that had chased them reached the edge of the lights. It did not cross into them. It stood there instead, hunched and shaking, its outline collapsing and reforming like a bad memory struggling to remember itself. The uniformed figures pretended not to see it. "We don't take them anymore. Not like that," one said quietly. The passenger in the aisle smiled, not kindly. "Then you'll take him." The clipboard was offered to the driver. A pen appeared in his shaking hand, heavy as if filled with something thicker than ink. "Sign," the figure said. "Confirm your stop." The destination line was blank. Behind him, the bus interior stretched, seats multiplying into darkness, waiting to be filled. Ahead, the checkpoint lights flickered. The driver realized then there was no correct choice, only a final one.
The pen trembled in the driver's hand. The clipboard felt heavier now, as if it were anchored to the space itself. The blank destination line waited patiently, absorbing light, absorbing time. The uniformed figures did not rush him. They never did. This moment, the passenger had said, always belonged to the driver. "What happens if I don't sign?" the driver asked. One of the figures flipped a page on the clipboard. The paper screamed softly, like something pulled apart too slowly. "Then the route corrects itself," it answered. "It always has." Behind the bus, the chasing thing let out another sound, lower this time, almost pleading. The driver finally looked at it fully. Beneath the distortion, beneath the wrong angles and stuttering motion, there was something horribly familiar in the shape of its shoulders. A driver's posture. A man who had once sat exactly where he was sitting now. "That was a replacement," the passenger said calmly. "But he ran." The driver swallowed. "So that's it? I sign, and I become this?" "Not exactly," the passenger replied. "You won't chase. You won't remember why you're angry. You'll just wait until the route needs you."
The frost map returned, blooming across the side windows. Seats lit up one by one, then dimmed. Generations of them, years stacked like layers of snow. "And if I don't?" the driver whispered. The passenger stepped closer, close enough that the driver could see the faint seams in its perfect face, like something assembled rather than born. "Then someone else will take your place," it said. "A passenger, a future driver, someone unlucky enough to sit where you shouldn't." The uniformed figure leaned in. "That's the rule. The route demands balance." The driver looked at the bus interior, at the endless rows, the waiting spaces. Then he looked at the thing in the dark, trapped between eras, never arriving, never leaving. Slowly he lowered the pen. He did not sign his name. Instead, he wrote the route number. The clipboard shuddered. The lights overhead flickered violently. The uniformed figures recoiled, murmuring in a language that hurt to hear. The passenger's expression cracked for the first time, confusion bleeding through the calm. "That's not," it began. The driver stood. "Routes end," he said hoarsely, "even necessary ones." The bus horn blared on its own, a deafening sound that tore through the checkpoint. The lights shattered, darkness rushed in, and the route screamed as it realized it had been named. Morning came gently. Snow lay undisturbed along the roadside as a bus rolled out of the mountain pass and into the lowlands, engine humming like it had never known strain. The storm was gone, the sky pale, ordinary. The bus pulled into a small terminal just outside an unnamed town. No one was waiting. The doors opened anyway. A man stepped down. He wore a winter jacket, unzipped despite the cold. No gloves, no hat. His movements were stiff, uncertain, like someone waking from deep sleep in an unfamiliar room. He blinked at the light, at the asphalt, at his own hands, as if checking they were real. Inside the terminal office, a clerk looked up, startled. "Sir, you okay?" The man hesitated. "I think so." His voice sounded unused. "Is this the last stop?" The clerk frowned and glanced at the schedule. "That route doesn't run anymore," she said slowly. "Hasn't for years." They both turned toward the bus. It was already pulling away. No driver sat behind the wheel. The clerk swore under her breath and reached for the phone, but the man felt a sudden, inexplicable pull, an ache behind his eyes, a pressure in his chest, like something important had just been misplaced. "Wait," he said, though he didn't know why. The bus disappeared around the corner. Later, records would be checked, archives opened, old files retrieved. They would note with confusion that the winter route through the mountain pass was finally listed as closed. Reason: route self-terminated. One unresolved detail would remain: a manifest discrepancy. One passenger delivered, no driver returned. That night, the man lay awake in a cheap motel room, staring at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw rows of seats stretching into darkness, waiting. And somewhere far away, deep in the mountains where no road should exist anymore, an empty bus idled, doors open, destination sign flickering. In service.